So this is an envelope, and it's just sort of funny that the stamp on it was 3 cents, which actually seems like a lot, but I guess not compared to 47 cents, which it is now. So, of course, in those days, which would have been the 30s and the 40s, there were no phones, or maybe they were too poor to have a phone, so they would be in touch by postcard. They would actually make plans by postcard. So this is from my mother, and she writes, "Dear Father, I'm just dropping you a line to let you know we won't be over Wednesday night. Millie told me you would be over Thursday, so we will see you then. If you have any sugar, please bring it. So long, your daughter, Anna." They were poor. And this is a postcard I sent him probably, you know, in the 1970s or early 80s. It's about visiting a church in Italy. My grandfather was Italian American. He was born in this country, but his family wasn't. Obviously, his parents weren't. So I ended by saying, "Miss you, will call you on September 11th. Of course, that was in the early 80s, so it had nothing to do with 9/11. The reason I treasure this stuff, and I have a whole box of it, is that my mother, who is a wonderful person and I adored her, did not save a lot of stuff. So this is what I have left. My grandfather saved my mittens, so I treasure these. And because of that, I am somebody who saves everything. I have everything from my family, ever. So this is also from my mother, written March 20th, 1949, which meant that my aunt was pregnant because my cousin was born on May 14th, which is in a couple of weeks. "Dear Father, please don't get mad. I can't come today." I don't know how how he'd get it. When would he get it? When would the today be? "Mama is going to Grandma, and I can't leave Millie alone," because I guess she was 7.5 months pregnant. "I will be over Tuesday. The baby," that would be me, "sends you a kiss. Well, so long for now. I'll see you soon. Your daughter, Anna." So another thing about my grandfather is that he liked to color, which I think is pretty bizarre. So here's a rodeo coloring book. And he did this well into his, 80s. He hardly worked. He was supposedly a house painter. I have some of his paint swatches from, I forget what the company was, the little Dutch boy was the symbol of. But also what he did was it was called a numbers runner in those days before OTB. There was illegal betting. You would pick 3 numbers, and I think they came up with the number of the day through the horse races, like who won and when they came in and all of that stuff, and they'd calculate it. And it was either you would want the number straight, so let's say it was 475, you'd either have it straight or combination. So if it came out 547, you'd get less money, but you'd get something. So that's what he did, and it seemed like a normal thing to me for a grandfather to do. What did I know? So this is a statue of a saint. He was not religious, but he was sort of nominally Catholic. And I always thought it was the Virgin Mary, but now that I look at it, there's no baby Jesus, and the Virgin Mary is always in light blue. So I'm thinking it's Saint Teresa. I don't know saints. I left the Catholic Church when I was about 17 or 18, and I'm pretty much agnostic now, but I love churches and statues, so I should find out who this is. So what else can I say about my grandfather? He came from a big family, a lot of siblings. They were all sort of crazy and, weird. And I think he had one one brother, Uncle Amerigo, and he was blind and obese, and he lived next door to my grandfather, and he lived with Uncle Jimmy, who was another brother, who was married to Aunt Bobby, who was totally crazy, and they all lived together. And years later, I guess, again, I was in my 20s or 30s, or my aunt, the one who's, didn't want to be bothered with anybody, she claimed that Uncle Marigo molested her. So she's a little off herself, so we never knew if it was true. He certainly didn't have intercourse with her. But I don't mean to minimize that. I mean, I take stuff like that really seriously, but, he may have been groping because he's blind, and she was a little bit, what's the word? She was a little bit disabled herself, mentally. So there was this whole big family. I think my grandfather's mother lived next door, and she was very mean, which is very unusual for an Italian grandmother. And my mother grew up not even really liking her, and my mother liked everybody. And then there were a million cousins nearby, like 2 blocks away. This was in the Gun Hill Road section of the Bronx, which was pretty much all Italian then. I saw a film recently called Gun Hill Road, and a documentary about a transgender. It wasn't a documentary, it was a feature film, but it had a lot of information about a transgender from a boy to a girl. It was a great film, and it showed that Gun Hill Road now is mainly Puerto Rican and West Indian. So these other cousins, I think they had 10 or 11 kids in the family, and I would say 3 or 4 of them died of tuberculosis, and they're, under 20 years old. And I really, growing up, loved those. They were my mother's cousins, and I loved seeing them, and they were funny, and they, I think, 5 of them shared a bedroom, but they seemed happy. Their mother was leaning over the stove in their kitchen and went on fire, and she didn't want to wake them up. So she went running out into the hallway, and the running made the fire, even worse. She lived, for a week or so in a horrible burn unit in a hospital, and then supposedly, this might be Italian drama, but supposedly died on Mother's Day. I mean, I don't know how much worse you can get than your mother, dying. So that's my grandfather. I sometimes, miss him, not as kind of deeply and horribly as I miss my mother, who died 7 years ago. My grandfather died 21 years ago, and so, he made the best meatballs. In an Italian family, everybody fights about whose meatballs are better. And so I could never really say this, but I liked his meatballs the best.